The secret of my success is always not my success, it's God's success. And you know, when you step out of the boat and you keep your eyes on Jesus, then you can walk on water. And that's the only way to do it. But the more mundane aspect of it is that I grew up in the entertainment industry. My parents were stars in Hollywood. My father won the box office award, so that means one year he was a big star. And I tell people that fame is fleeting. If you're going into this industry for fame, you're going to be disappointed because 10 years later they won't remember your name. And then he starred on Broadway for many years, and I grew up on the hardcore, sort of licentious, libertine lifestyle, and didn't know any Christians and was anti-Christian. And somebody gave me a Bible after I funded 5 feature films for Oliver Stone and other people. And I read the Bible and I came to Christ, and I headed up the organization that did The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe on CBS television. So then I asked the same question you know that we just asked. How do you achieve a redemption of the media? I guess I was atoning for my sins. And so one way is to help Hollywood realize that they can do better by doing good. And that's always the case. The cream always rises to the top. So we started doing the movie guide analysis. We look at movies in terms of dramatic principles, philosophy and theology and all of this. And we find out that movies with good faith and values do better at the box office. And that should be a no-brainer, because in the United States, you've got 149 million to 160 million people who go to church every week. So it's a big audience. What surprised me is that overseas, even in Australia, I have a chart that I'm going to show today, the top grossing films in Australia, and the majority of them, like 70%, are movie guide winners. So I was told by somebody from one of the Australian broadcasters, oh, we're a post-Christian country. And I said, well, why are you going to all these good films? You know, they're because people want good to triumph over evil. They want faith, they want values, whether they've articulated it or not. So we've helped Hollywood recognize that, and it's given us a tremendous entree. I just finished reading a script for Warner Brothers on Paradise Lost, and another script on Ben-Hur, remake of Ben-Hur. So we're always working on these projects, always helping people, teaching people how to make great movies, and then helping parents teach their children how to choose the good and reject the bad. I'm running a couple of workshops, I think. I'm going to speak on 3 of them on making blockbuster movies. I do believe, although we don't want to become Neoplatonists or whatever, but Plato once said a civilization that forgets how to tell its stories dies. And he's talking about ancient civilizations. But the fact of the matter is, if you read the poem Ozymandias is saying, I'm going to be my kingdom's going to last forever, and here he is, a stone statue, broken in the sand, barely visible. And that's what happens to civilizations. Well, I don't want the civilization of Christendom to die. I don't think it will. God's in charge. But we want to make movies, and God calls people to communicate. 60% of the time in the New Testament, of the 5 words that Jesus has used for preaching, the one that he uses most is not evangelism, it's not apostle, it's not teaching, it's not discipling. The one that he uses the most is to go into the world and speak to the people, to tell stories, to be the herald. And that's what Jesus did. He told stories. So I teach people how to tell great stories. That's what I'll do today. Tomorrow I'll teach them how to teach their kids to be media wise. We do a 5-day course in how to make movies that'll succeed. It covers everything from contracts. Contracts in are an arcane art in Hollywood, and there's somebody here who got a bad contract and it's been fighting the distributor ever since then. You've got to be very careful. We do marketing, we do every aspect of filmmaking in an intense course. It was the course I used to do when I was chairman of the departments at University of California, Berkeley. So I've done this course for a long time, but it's the nuts and bolts of making movies that succeed, making anything that succeeds. The core component of my work is redeeming the media. And that means there's a 2-part strategy. One part is to redeem the most important person in the mass media, and that's not the head of a movie studio. Michael Eisner lost his job as head of Disney. Dick Cook lost his job as head of Disney. Ted Turner lost his network and went on a program we had in the United States called Larry King, who lost his job. And Ted Turner said, you know, I lost my network and I went from 9 billion to 1 billion. The most powerful person in Hollywood is a 12 to 24-year-old who goes to movies. If they vote for a good movie, whatever that good movie happens to be, recently a movie called 42 about the first African American who broke the color barrier was very good, very Christian. That movie will do well. If they vote for a bad movie, the same night, a movie called Scary Movie, just horrible. If I told you about it, you'd cut it off the video. So the vote is the most powerful thing in Hollywood. Hollywood makes movies to make money. If they vote for, Blindside, Blindside does well. If they vote for, Hangover 3, Hangover 3 does well. So we need to encourage and to help and equip that part. So that's one part of redeeming the media. The second part is redeeming and helping the filmmakers themselves. Well, we do a lot of things, How do I reach the young people? It's very carefully wrought. Back in the late 70s, I was head of the TV department at City University of New York. We got 60 professors together and developed the first media literacy course, which is really the base of almost every media literacy course that's taught in the United States and often throughout the world. So we reach them by taking that and putting it into a biblical format, and I teach it at schools. I've taught in Korea to 880 schools from as far away from Korea as Malaysia and Brazil and all over the place. And then I'll teach in Russia, teach in Germany. So we replicate it. We've produced a 6-week church course, a little 1-hour course for what we call in the United States Sunday school that they can use to teach their kids to be media wise. We have books that are available on cultural wisdom, media wisdom, how to train it. Really, it's a very concise process that would take a parent about 5 minutes a day or a grandparent. I tell the grandparents they have just as much interest in this as the parents. Usually the parents are very busy. So the grandparents can take the child and help them with this. First, you have to help the child understand the influence of the media. Everybody's influenced, but nobody wants to admit that they're influenced. So you have to tell them that when they see a new iPad advertisement and they want to buy the iPad, the media's influenced them. That's it, I buy an iPad and I'm going to be William Shakespeare of the 21st century. So everybody's influenced. We know how they're influenced. We have a lot of studies on that. Marketing companies have learned how to market to people. Number two, you have to understand the stages of development of your children. When they're 3 to 7, they're in the imagination stage, and they can't figure out the difference between fact and fiction. So if you show them something that they can't deal with, they're going to use it as their scripts of behavior. Number three, you have to understand the grammar of the media, and what I'll do is play a little thing with your audience, look at me and put your hand on your chin. So most people look at me and put their hand on their cheek because they see the visual dominates. And then in the United States, we have prescription drug commercials. So they'll advertise something for arthritis. I've got arthritis in both shoulders, and at the bottom of this advertisement showing the guy climbing a mountain and his life is happy and he's playing with his dog and his wife looks happy. And at the bottom of it they said, if this causes kidney failure, heart attack, brain damage, if you're writhing on the floor in pain, you shouldn't take it. But nobody reads that. Nobody reads that. They all watch this beautiful scene and say, well, if I take this. Actually, my heart doctor gave me one of those medicines, Lipitor, and every Lipitor commercial, which you don't have those types of commercials here, makes it look, it's the solution to your heart problems. And I got cramps in my legs and I couldn't get up for it. But it says it, you just don't pay attention. So the visual dominates. Number four, understand your values. What do you believe? What do you believe about who man is and who God is and what God is? And then number five is learning how to ask the right questions, those 122 questions. Ascertainment questions to find out who is the hero. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not easy. Then how does the hero solve the plot problem? And then how does that compare with my values? The movie guide has grown tremendously. It grew 400% in the last couple of years on the internet, so it's much bigger than anybody else. And it's grown from 1 million to 14 million in radio, and now it's probably going to double that in the next week or so. So it's very popular because in Australia, 92% of the parents are concerned about the media's effect on their children. 92%. You know, that's bigger than America. In America, it's 42%. So more Australians are concerned about the media than Americans. And I thought it was a big group in America. And really because in America, we're in the heart of the belly of the beast. We think that we're in a hot tub, but we're actually being like the frog in the kettle, being boiled. So we have the tools. Movie Guide never tells you to go or not go. Movie Guide helps the child to develop discernment, helps the child to make wise choices, and helps the parent teach the child to be discerning. Hollywood looks at the church as being this unified community, usually with a stereotype of the image of the church. And the church looks at Hollywood as this unified stereotype. And the fact of the matter is that it's much more complex than that. There's 6 studios. Out of the 6 studios, one is owned by the Japanese, Sony. So they want to do their thing. They want to make money. That's why Sony bought Columbia and a couple of other companies and cobbled them together. So you have a wide variety of people, and Hollywood wants to make movies that reach every significant demographic group. They want to make, and I said this several times, they want to make movies for the Spanish-speaking Americans. I just had a Korean producer study with me in my 5-day course. They want to make movies for Koreans. They want to make movies for Armenians. They want to make movies for every different people group. Young girls who want to go to romance movies and young boys who want to see action and adventure. So in that mix of all those different desires by Hollywood to maximize their profits, we've shown them that this is a gigantic audience. So you make movies like Fireproof for $490,000 and you can make $175 million at the box office, which is the highest return you could possibly make. Passion of the Christ did well, Blindside did well, movies with faith and values always do well. There's a study out that I believe came from Cornell University that 90% of the children are abandoning the values of their parents, Christian parents, Christian faith. There was a refined study on that just last weekend by a research organization called Baehr. And Baehr showed that of that group, there are several that have become exiles. They just don't feel comfortable in the church. There's several that have become antagonistic. That's not the word Baehr uses because they figure out these clever branding words. They're all E words, but they become antagonistic to the faith. They want to live the high life or et cetera, so they don't think that Christianity offers them that fun and fabulous lifestyle, which is not true, but it's, it's the myth and the myth conception that takes you down the road of perdition. But losing 90% of the kids means that people around the world don't understand that the United States is in serious difficulty and needs prayer. For instance, when we started doing the movie guide analysis of the box office, the population was maybe 100 million less. It's climbed tremendously because of immigrants. But at that point, you had more people going to church every week. You had about 180 million, then it went down to 156 million. This has been only over 10 years, and now it's 136 or somewhat million. And some people are saying that it's less than that. So you're losing that Christian base. And that means when you look at America from Australia, you see that culture that's being changed in a radical way. And that culture influences your culture. So we need to pray that we need to pray that the youth return. We need to pray that they don't get seduced by the media into lifestyles that are self-destructive. 50% of the 75% of the youth in America become sexually active by the time they're 17 years old. And that means 50% of them have a sexually transmitted disease. But we don't realize the consequence. The movies never show us the consequences. The movies said, well, you hop into bed and you're going to be happy. They don't show you that 1 out of the 30 or so diseases All of them have an impact, and some of them are so subtle that they never impact you, but they'll impact the child. They may just give you a cold sore. We're here to help you. Go to movieguide.org. We're here to help you. And that's how parents can learn. We have the tools, we've perfected the tools, we know what to do, and we can help you teach your kids to keep the values. The culture-wise family is the condensation and the improvement of all of those work that the 60 professors did for the first media literacy course, tied and founded on a very biblical basis. So it gives parents, if they take 5 minutes a day, an opportunity to help their children to really become savvy, to to become media-wise. I hear one person here said, well, then we just turned off the TV. Well, often that'll sow the seeds of rebellion. What you need to do is to help them access, analyze, interpret, and create. Creating is very important. When you create a television show, a radio show, whatever you're doing, you help people tremendously to learn how the media works. We're heading down a path that the world was already at a long time ago. In Rome, Jesus came in the fullness of time. Rome was so debauched because lust is never satisfied. You're never going to be satisfied with lust. Anybody out there who thinks that fulfilling their lust is going to satisfy them is wrong. What satisfies people is love. Lust is always taking. You can never take enough. You're going to become a glutton. You're going to become, over the top. But love is always giving. It's caring. It's sharing. The more you're like a loving person, Albert Schweitzer, Livingston, Mother Teresa, or you, it gives. The more you give, the more happy you are, the more joyous you are. And it's a biblical principle, but it's also a human principle. So when we give to people, so we need to get over this lifestyle of lust. People say, well, they were born this way. Well, when we look at the studies on violence, the impact of violence, 7 to 11% of the kids want to copy the violence in the media. Not all the kids. So they were born that way. Traditionally, the process of education was to help them to deal with that tendency to want to be violent, to beat up on other kids, to bully other kids. If they're born that way, how can you blame them for bullying other kids? You can't. If that's your norm, so what you have to say, get over it. I'm going to teach them not to beat up on their brothers and sisters. I'm going to teach them how to live in a civil society. That's what education is, taking them out of the darkness of violence, if that's their propensity, into the light of being freed from that obsession. All of the studies show that sex and violence do not sell. A study by UCLA, University of California at Los Angeles, which is a state university, so it has no moral preference to grind, shows that 74% of the girls don't like sex and violence in movies and television, and 58% of the boys. Walmart and Hallmark, who are big advertisers because they reach family audiences, Walmart sells to families, do every year $10 million of studies to show. And one of the Walmart people, a friend of mine who was at this event, said in the morning they showed their $10 million studies, just like we do with Movie Guide. We do a detailed economic analysis. I'm going to do it today. I'm going to show the chart of what movies sell in Australia, and then I'm going to go at the end of it, where are the movies with sex and violence? If this sells, how come they're not in the top 20? There are only 300 movies released a year. We don't see any. So Walmart and Hallmark does the studies, and then the guy calls me up in the afternoon and says some crazy producer or advertiser says, well, we understand that family films do better, but we need to change the conception of family. So there's an agenda. There's an intentionality. It doesn't have anything to do with the facts. And all the facts are being presented at the World Congress of the Family. We know that intact families do better economically. They do better in terms of grade point averages. They do better in terms of their children's growth and stability. They do better in every single economic index. They do better at the box office. What are the big selling films? I had one director from the Directors Guild who said, sex sells, and I said, let's see, the #1 film this year is Finding Nemo. Now that was a sexy film, the fish were naked, right? Pornography is bankrupt in the United States. So why do we continue the myth? And it's an interesting process, the self-delusion of society, and the self-delusion of the intellectual community. One of the worst and most abhorrent people in terms of human beings in the history of mankind was Rousseau. I mean, Rousseau hated his father, the woman who took care of him and became his lover, who was 20 years older. He let her die in ignominy. He gave every one of his child to the orphanage. He was just everybody he knew said that Rousseau was an ugly, miserable person. When he died, because he was advocating free love, that's why he took his 7 children and put them into orphanages. He was advocating all these things. They were laying wreaths down on his thing. They put him in the national, Parisian, they made him a saint. For what? The guy who founded the French Revolution, which killed more people. So the self-delusion, Paul Johnson talks about it in the book of the Intellectuals. The self-delusion of the intellectual community is amazing. People have to break the spell of this misconception. If 74% of the girls don't like sex or violence, and you keep showing it to them, you're going to condition them to it. It's like a child who doesn't like to smoke, and you keep giving them a cigarette. Sooner or later, they're going to pick up an addiction. Don't do it. When they say yuck, that's enough. That's the good sign. In Hollywood, there generally is not a prejudice against Christian filmmakers. They don't care if you're black, white, green, yellow, Christian, gay, whatever. What they care about is that you make money. So Hollywood has this bottom line. In state-supported institutions, let's say France, a friend of mine wrote a script, and he said, what do you think about it? He went to Harvard. And I said, it's very boring, because we analyze scripts. I said, it sounds like a French film. And he said, that's what I wanted. And I said, well, the French don't even like French films. They go to American movies like Avengers and Captain America. We know what does well in France. So the Academy, in France, often, and I love France. I studied at the University of Bordeaux and Toulouse, decides what would fit their agenda and not what people want. And this is a big thing when you put gatekeepers between people and what they want, and you tell them they can't buy a bottle of Coca-Cola, they have to buy, mineral water, then you've got a problem. So we believe that people, God has created people with a lot of common sense. I love that study about the 74% of the girls don't want sex and violence. I love that. I have never met a mother who didn't tell me that her children, when they first saw something, would have the yuck factor. And just knowing that, there was a guy, I'll tell you, the professor at Oxford, he spent years trying to show that you had to brainwash children to believe in God. After 30 years of studies, he said children naturally believe in God. They have to be brainwashed to teach them not to believe. When they look at the sky, all of creation cries out for God. So they have to be taught not to believe. What we have to say is enough. Don't teach our children not to believe what is real in favor of what is self-destructive.